dealt with anxiety for a long time in my life, and I successfully conquered it around 25, 26. Like had there was like 0% anxiety left in me, and part of that for me was the things that you said. I was working out, but I was not healthy. I was drinking a lot of alcohol. I wasn't meditating. A lot of things I was doing were very avoidant behavior. Like I think from the outside you could have, like, it would have been more obvious that I would be somebody who suffered from anxiety. Um, and for me, all of those things that you mentioned helped a lot. Like just becoming
Mm.
a more mentally and physically healthy person, and I kind of like had perfected this ideal lifestyle where I was always like in top shape mentally, physically, spiritually.
Mm.
At some point, my dad passed away,
Mhm.
and because of the grieving process, like at some point that kicked in very intensely, and I gave it a lot of space. So I took time off from work, and I really allowed myself to say like, okay, whatever grief is gonna fall on me, like I'm gonna let it come, and I'm gonna give it all the time and space to heal it. And that was there were a few months where I was like immobilized emotionally for many days because I was so preoccupied with the grief that I couldn't find the energy to work out or to meditate, um, to really have like that positive structure in my life. And suddenly,
Mm.
like, the anxiety started kicking in again,
Mm.
and I realized like, huh, I have had like this perfect structure in my life, which felt supporting and nourishing, but actually I was kind of like latching onto it. Like, this is the thing that keeps me from being depressed and anxious. And
Mm.
then, like, being in a hole for a few months because my dad had passed away, I was dealing with that. I wasn't able to do all those things, and all the negative feelings, like, they were there, like, right back. And not even like grief related, but just everything that I had thought I had cured, um, because of being healthy. It was just back, and then I had to find a new place where it was like, okay, how can I become like nourished and healthy without needing all the habits in support of it? Like, can I find a place in myself where even when I have nothing and do nothing, and I'm kind of like a bit worthless because I just have to lay around and grieve, can I
Mhm.
be that without being anxious? And that was very interesting because I never realized that healthy habits can also be a way of just avoiding the anxiety instead of curing it.
Mm. You said that you had all these healthy structures into place to maintain your happy mood, right? But then when you were going through grief with your father, that didn't allow you to do these things, to go to the gym and all the keep the structures into place, because you had to go full on in the grief.
Yeah, yeah.
Did that create a negative effect, or was that just the exact thing that you had to do, do you think? Or did you now start to feel guilty and worse?
Well, what I realized was that if I need those habits to not feel anxious, um, or bad about myself,
Mm.
then those habits are actually the product of anxiety instead of healing
Mm-hmm.
it, because I do them because I'm anxious about feeling anxious.
Okay,
I'm
fair enough.
avoiding the
Then okay,
anxiety.
then let's say if you
Yeah.
don't do any of them, then now what's left? You strip them off. Then what's left is just pure anxiety.
Yeah. And then I was like, oh, in the end, I still have to face that. Like, I have to dig into myself and see, like, what makes me feel this way, as like just being by myself. Like, do I think that I need to do certain things to have value? um
Mm.
yeah, I really needed it was like more, okay, now I still have to face myself, right? Like, if I don't face myself, I will know what I'm anxious about, what I'm avoiding, because I'll always be successfully avoiding it.
Mm-hmm. So do you think when you just allow it to be there, because then what you have is the pure anxiety.
Hmm.
Will that eventually move away from you if you do? Because what happens then if you just sit with it?
At times it like, well, I can say what happened for me, right? I cannot say what
Mm.
happens for everybody. It depends on what the anxiety is about.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it would just be there, nothing would change. Sometimes I would get like, if I really felt it in there and I approached it with curiosity, I would get answers about like, oh, I recognize this, like this is an old feeling that's unexpressed.
Mm-hmm.
Or um, what would also happen sometimes is I would reach a point that it was like completely overwhelming and I couldn't really handle it anymore, and I just looked for a way out as in like a soothing habit, to make me feel good,
Mm.
and that could be like things. I think that's maybe how addictions would develop in the past. Like I would start
Mm-hmm.
thinking, oh, if I would just smoke a cigarette, I would feel so much better, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I would, and then that would like give me more um, stamina to face it. But in the end, it kind of like, because I gave all these negative feelings so much space, like really taking time off of everything. Like if I feel it, I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna feel it. I'm not gonna distract myself with work or friends or anything.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, like I just started to become comfortable with the feeling, and then over time that comfort became like bigger than the feeling itself and kind of took over, and then there was just very little anxiety left. Like it's not
But
that
which
there.
comfort was that? Sorry, you say that comfort took over. So what was that comfort that you're referring to?
Well, the first comfort was being comfortable with the anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
because I kind of got used to it, like feeling it day after day. Like in my case, at that point in time, it manifested towards my girlfriend, where I would think like, right now I'm feeling so bad about myself, like I'm not a fun guy to be around because I'm angry and I'm sad and I'm grieving. And I would start thinking, well, actually towards my friends as well, I would think like all my friends are gonna start disliking me, they're gonna start leaving me, my girlfriend's gonna like get tired of putting up with my behavior, and I don't know how long it will last, because with grief you can tell. And so the anxiety would project itself onto my relationships, and then at some point I just became comfortable with feeling that day after day, and it would be like, yeah, okay, so if that happens, which probably won't, right? Then they were not the right people for you, because everyone, I mean, sometimes goes through shit in their lives.
Yeah, sure,
Yeah,
sure.
and then I would think, okay, well, what if everybody leaves? What would happen then? I would think back to being alone and think, well, I've been alone many times and it always ended up great. So I would just became comfortable with like all the things that I was anxious about, like comfortable with the outcomes that I feared, comfortable with fearing them, um, just comfortable feeling bad about myself instead of the usual. And then that feeling of comfort, being comfortable with those things, would start to extend with being comfortable with everything, until that was stronger than the anxiety itself.
Mm. Okay. And then, okay, so that's interesting because that basically means that the anxiety was there, but then next to it, it sounds almost like next to it, comfort was growing, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like of there being simultaneous feelings.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of like, there are some feelings which can act as a background to others. I think that's how I often see happiness. Like I tend to be happy almost all the time. I there have been few periods in the last years where I didn't feel happy, and if they were short. But I have been sad many times. I've been angry many times, but that happiness can exist like underneath it. Just like when you are depressed, you can feel depressed and then you can have these joyful, fun moments, but I mean, you're also depressed, right? It's not exclusive.